So hopefully now you feel reasonably happy with the different bits of Xcode and how the general interface works. In this video, we're going to see how to add objects to our main storyboard, so the part that we saw in the previous video. So make sure you've got main storyboard selected, and I'm going to hide this list of different objects for the moment just to keep the screen tidy. So I'm going to click that little icon there, and then we can just see the view controller, and I'll make it a little bit bigger if I can. There we go. So remember, this is our screen that we're working with essentially. And now I'm going to go over to our context menu here and make sure you've got the blue circle and square selected. If not, then just tap on it and that will show you the object library. So if we just scroll through things here, we've got things like table view controllers, tab bar controllers. We saw that a couple of videos ago. That allows you to have a tab bar at the bottom of your app with various different icons. And if you want to have a look through in your own time, there's a load of stuff there. Probably some interface elements that you're reasonably familiar with there if you've got an iPhone or an iPad. There we go. So we're actually going to be working with labels in this video. So we can jump straight to labels by clicking in the box at the bottom and just typing label, and there we go. So we're going to drag that into our app. So just take it and drag in, and here it goes. So before you let go, let's just see what happens as we move it around. So you will notice a blue dotted line appeared there. That means that it will be centered in the iPhone 6 screen if we drop it there, centered horizontally, that is. If I want it to be centered vertically as well, I can move it to the middle and then it'll be centered horizontally and vertically. And there's some other guidelines around as well. So there's the nice margins and there's the left edge of the screen, etc. So it gives us some nice predictive positions of where it thinks we might want to put the label. I'm just going to put it in the center of the screen towards the top there for the moment. And there we go. Now we have our label and we can see that straight away. If we run the app on our simulator, we'll be able to see that label right away on our phone. Let's just check and make sure that it does indeed appear there. Relying on those center lines, by the way, long term will not be great because it will be centered on the iPhone 6 screen, but then if someone runs your app on an iPad or a different size iPhone or in landscape mode, for example, it won't be centered. So we'll see something in a few videos time called auto layout, which will allow us to do that much more powerfully. But for now, you can see here we now have our first app that has the word label on it. So we've actually managed to customize something. Great. So how do we play around with this label and change the style? Well, if we tap on it, you can see our context menu on the right now appears with a label menu. And this has a load of options for our label to make it look exactly as we'd like. So if you want to change the text, first of all, you just double click on it like that. And you might want something like, "Hello Rob," to start off with. You'll notice it's no longer centered. So you'll need to drag it back to that blue line to have it centered on the iPhone 6 screen. And then just tap on it again to make sure you've got the label menu here. And I'm just going to draw your attention to a few of the most obvious options really. So we can change the color. If we click on that color there, you can choose one of the main colors, or you can choose absolutely any color from the spectrum here. So just by dragging it around, you can get any color. And there's a few other options as well. You can choose one of the pre-selected colors there. And then if you know about things like red, green, and blue proportions in your colors, you can actually choose the color there, or you can use an HTML code to get your color. You can change something called opacity, which we'll definitely look at in more detail later on. That essentially decides how see-through the object is. So if I just make that a darker color, there we go, and then we reduce the opacity, you can see it starts to fade out. There we go. An opacity of 0 means it's completely invisible. So we'll use that later on to be able to have labels on top of other things and still be able to see that thing behind it. A final useful thing to look at here is that we can use the dropper. So if you click on the dropper at the bottom, you can then move your cursor anywhere on the screen and say I want to get that blue from the folder icon there, then I can just tap on that. Whoops. There we go. And then it will bring that color in. So that's really useful if you've been developing your look of your app in Photoshop or something like that and you want to get a particular color, you can just use the dropper there. So let's stick with that blue. And tap that again to get your label menu back. So we can change the font, we can make it bigger or smaller. You can see as we start to make it bigger, it gets too big for the label size that we've picked. So we're going to have to resize that. There we go, to make it big enough. What I might do is just make the label quite a bit bigger so that we can change the size without having any problems. To do that and keep it central, I'm going to need to change the alignment to centered. There we go, and then I can center it again, and now I could change the text or change the size and it would still be centered and appear nicely. We can change the font here as well. So if you click on the T for text, we can choose one of the weights of the standard font. So go for heavy maybe. There we go. Or we can choose one of the other standard fonts. So if we go for headline, for example, then it changes that to that default style. Or if we want to be really exciting, we can click custom and then choose any font we like that's installed on our system. So I'm going to go for chalkboard because it's quite nice and friendly. And let's then increase the size again after that's been decreased. There we go. So we've got a nice friendly label now, and we know how to change colors, alignments, and fonts. By default, you only get one line in a label, but you can change that to have 2 or 3, 4 lines available. You can also change it to 0 if you want to have an unlimited number of lines, which is quite handy if you don't know how many lines you're going to need in your label. And then just jumping to a few of these, we can change the color that we'll get when the text is highlighted. We can add a shadow. So if I choose, let's say, a yellow shadow, you can see we've just got a little bit of yellow on there. Feel free to play around and change that, and we can change how the shadow looks as well in terms of how offset it is from the original in both horizontal and vertical directions. -1 means upwards, 1 means downwards, and on the horizontal a positive number means to the right and a negative number means the shadow is to the left. I'm not going to go into those ones there, but I will just mention the alpha, which is, we saw opacity a couple of minutes ago. The alpha is a number that represents the opacity. So 1 means completely opaque, completely visible. If I change that to 0.5, then it becomes 50% opacity. So that means it's a little bit faded, and 0 means it's completely invisible. That can be very useful if we want something to appear at some point in our app, then we create it, but with an alpha of 0. Finally, we can change the background. So we could have some kind of horrendous green background there. And there's a few other options for resizing down at the bottom. But there we go. That's how we work with labels and then how we completely customize the look and feel of our app through customizing the labels. Let's just make absolutely sure that when we run that app, it will look as it does on our interface. There we go. Fantastic. So a very quick challenge for you, just to make sure you've got the hang of labels. I want you to delete the label that we've got there, which you can do just by tapping on it and pressing delete. There it goes. And let's get rid of that as well. And I want you to create a label which says "This is cool" and is centered completely in the middle of the screen with green text and a yellow background. So a label that says "This is cool" centered in the middle of the screen with green text and a yellow background. Go for it. All right, hope you managed that. It's pretty straightforward. We'll start by typing label, or the first bit of label, into the object library down there, and then we'll drag it in. I want it centered right in the middle of the screen, so we'll center it both horizontally and vertically. I'm going to start by making it pretty big, so I've got plenty of room, and then centering it, and then once again I'll drag it to the middle of the screen. Then double click to change the text. So this is cool. All right, we're almost there. I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger as well. And then I wanted green text on a yellow background. So let's just choose yellow for the background. There we go. And then up the top, we want green for the text. Fabulous. And if we want, we can just run that, partly because it's fun running your apps on your phone, but just it's always a good idea to make sure that your app does indeed look exactly like you thought it would when you run it on the simulator. Wonderful. So now you know how to work with labels and customize them. We're going to look at a couple of other types of interface objects, and that is text inputs and buttons in the next video. See you there.